thing there, but you mentioned a French drain. Are you familiar with the French drain?
Through the mayor, not really, because I'm not an engineer, but that is the wording that was provided, and they did speak to development engineering. They said it was not permanent because there's another solution shown on their grading plan. It's just not finished
French
yet.
drains, to me, it'd be a no-no there, but anyways, I think it might cause more problems than this. Anyways, the other question I have is, when this whole thing, like when you look at the site, they built these two buildings already, and I know they've been there quite a while, but they seem to be a lot higher than the development right behind it. Was there ever grading taken into consideration there? I mean, they stand quite a bit. If you look at the diagram, and I guess my question is, was there a grading plan produced for this property?
Through the mayor, there's a grading plan with the building department for this, yes.
And does that consider the height of the buildings?
It would consider the grade of the whole property, is my understanding.
Okay, that's all for now, thanks.
Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alicia, what if we did not allow the accessory unit, I guess it is, what happens then?
Through the mayor, I think what they could do is just make it so that the basement connects internally to the upstairs, and it would be like any other house, and it wouldn't have a separate unit in the basement.
And therefore, then you would not need that extra parking spot?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Alicia, I have a couple, if I may. I'm looking again at page 126 and 127. And I have looked at this property previously, and today, of course, the road was closed temporarily to get some servicing in, but I have had a good look at it. It's my understanding that the property to the west of these two constructed structures, right to Queen Street, that still is the commercial block, and it will be the commercial block in the future, correct?
That's correct. There's actually a site plan approved for it.
Thank you. Now, I've always thought, and I'm sure this was what was proposed, that these two buildings have two units currently in each building with an upstairs, a main floor, and basement. So 4, 2 and 2, 2 and 2, 4. And if this application was approved, it would be main floor upstairs, and then a basement would be the second in each one, thus 4 basements converted to 4 apartments. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay. The parking, I'm trying to visualize this parking. The map on page 127, is that angle parking that is being proposed in front of that building coming off of Evergreen? Is that angle?
No, it's not. It's regular parking. The driveway just widens out at the property line, but there's 4 X's in front of each dwelling. Those would be the 4 spaces in front of each of the units.
So there is 1 parking space per unit, we'll say. 8 spaces, 4 on one building in front of one structure, 4 in front of the other.
Yes, plus the garages.
Do we not have a requirement of 1.5 per unit, or is 1 all that's required?
It's 2 per dwelling unit and then 1 per accessory dwelling unit. So there's 2 spaces for each property that are in the garage, and then 4 out on the lawn. So there's a total of 6 on each lot.
Okay. Just trying to visualize how this is going to work on that street, access and coming and going. Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions for planning staff? None at this time. I'll move on then. I see that Civic Planning Solutions, Mr. Rowe is here, and I would ask at this time if there is anyone in attendance to speak in favor of this application, and we will proceed first with the agent, please. Mr. Rowe, I believe you wish to speak. So you're just willing to sit tight and keep your pencil sharpened if there's concerns brought forward? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in attendance who wishes to speak in favor of this application? You may come forward to speak to it. Is there anyone in attendance this afternoon that wishes to speak in opposition or in general to this application? I'll start over here, please, if you would come forward, and I'll get to anyone else should they wish to speak. Mr. Baldock, you have the floor. Thank you.
I'm sorry Mr. Valley isn't here that I can compliment him on his presentation. I don't have a clicker and all of the professional things to do this job, but I'll try to do my best. Something that hasn't come, I was concerned that the word basement apartment wasn't going to come out in the discussion, but it has already. But nothing has come out about how they get into this apartment. So, Alicia, could you elaborate on how the people get into this apartment? It's the basement?
Through the mayor, the doors are at the backs of the units.
Okay, so in order to get out of their car and there to the back, they have to walk along the side of the building?
That's correct.
Yeah. Are they going to pave that area too, probably?
Through the mayor, they have not said they were going to pave it, and they would need a zoning amendment to add any additional paving, in the front yard at least.
Okay, based on that, or at least based on having that information forward, I would like to say to everyone present, I can't get all the titles that are involved, and I'm not going to try. So, to everyone, I'm concerned about the basement apartments in these units. I'm familiar with the indwell model in Simcoe, and it appears to be a much better way to supply efficient single housing units. Now, are any of you on council not aware of the indwell model for supplying singles housing? We're all talking on the same thing. Okay, good. Because the key line, as far as I'm concerned, that the indwell model includes support for living as well as just space for living. If we're going to supply living accommodation, it should be for living, not just space. This, to me, is space they're supplying. My understanding is the provincial government's reason for allowing second units in homes was to allow for granny flats to help families stay together. In situations like that, there's a natural bond which encourages interaction and cooperation between the occupants of the units. With this proposal, there can be 8 separate families, each with demands for space to live. How do they share that little bit of outside ground? In general, my understanding is the fire code is that units should have 2 exits, and in certain conditions, sprinkler systems are necessary for safety. It appears in this case, those things are not planned, but they could be included. The need for additional parking is also a concern. There's no visitor parking for these units. With 8 units, there's a good chance that some of the units will have guests with cars, need to park. Has a plan for street, well, you've considered that issue, but it's a problem without even thinking about it, I think. Okay, the decrease in green space is also a concern. This property was originally part of a large corner lot set aside. Parts of the green space on the large lot have almost been eliminated. They took the green space, reduced it from 4.5 meters to 40 centimeters. So it was a 90% reduction in the commercial area for green space. Any more reduction should not be considered in isolation, but should take into account all what has already been granted. I would make the point that you make this decision. Just because the provincial government has said this is possible, it does not mean you have to grant this. Remember that governments have made policies before that haven't turned out very well. When you pass this proposal, you're saying you think this will be a good way to provide living space in Simcoe. I do not believe that this is a good way to supply housing. I request that you deny this or at least place restrictions on this space. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Baldock. There may be a question. Are there any questions from members of council for Mr. Baldock? Councilor Wells, Black, and Oliver.
You mentioned that restrictions. What would you like to see as a restriction?
When I added that, I wrote this when I got the announcement, knew it was coming. But then when I looked this over today and said, you know, what can I do? What can I suggest as restrictions? I think I would be foolish to suggest the restrictions, but I think there should be a mechanism to put restrictions on. And I think it should involve the builder, it involve the neighbors, and the people that are living there. It's possible that having a family connection might be a good thing to have here. But somehow to make this a place for people to live would be what I would recommend. Yes, oh, sorry. Thank you. Nothing more.
Thank you. Councillor Black?
Dave, you alluded to a concern about paving the side, and I think I know where you're coming, but I just want you to expand on that. I know you sent us some pictures of the runoff going all the way down, and it was pretty bad. So I think I understand that your concern is that these properties are going to be overbuilt, pavement all over the front, pavement on the sides, and no place for water to drain. Is that your concern?
Yes, I can't imagine them having these access at the back of the building and not having some type of walkway along the side of the building. Just to get in there, you're going to have at least, you know, maybe probably they should be wheelchair accessible because of the units being for single people. They tend to have, you know, one person can have a single home, they need to have a wheelchair accessible.
Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question, David, was very similar to Councillor Black's. You had touched on the need to retain as much green space as possible, and that's important from both perspectives, I guess, just to have green space and its environmental benefits. But I was going to ask you about your concern around drainage and sufficient green space to absorb some of the more severe rainfall events we're starting to get. But you did answer that for Councillor Black. Thank you.
We've been assured that all the runoff water is going to go to Evergreen Hill Road through the sewer system. And part of the problem that's happened this week is the sewer system wasn't put in first. And I don't know the technicality of that, why they didn't put the drainage in first. And certainly the commercial property, hopefully they'll put the drainage in first so that we don't continue to have this problem.
Thank you. Councillor Broughton?
Thank you, Mayor Luke, through you to Dave. Dave, were you you're in the facility to the south, correct?
Yes, I live in the condo
How long have you been there?
since 2012, so
Okay.
6 years.
Were you circulated when the Committee of Adjustment dealt with this property?
Yes.
Is it different than what you were told or imagined back then? What did they tell you back then? Is there any difference now?
As far as I remember, there were no basement apartments. The buildings were to be semi-detached, 4 units, and so on. The creation of this new 4 extra units is a complete surprise. Well, pardon me, it's not a surprise now, but
Right.
when this application came out, we were certainly surprised.
And another question, if I may. What did they tell you is going on the rest of the property when you were circulated back then?
It was commercial, and it was going to be a pizza spot and a small convenience store.
No more residential?
4 units of residential were in that top of that building. So that's 4 more units of
On top?
residential. Yes.
No, okay. The other question.
So I guess technically now we have 12 families on the property on top of the commercial.
Right.
It's a lot of stuff
Right.
on that property.
Okay. And there's a Hickenbottom, that orange drain on your property, or I call it, you guys are condos there, are you not?
Yes, we're condos.
Who put that in?
The drain on our property?
Yeah. Was it always there?
The drain that goes down our driveway, technically we're responsible for it. I believe we pay for it.
No,
Sloop put it in. I mean, the builder of the condo, I believe, put it in.
No, I understand the drainage that's underground, but there's also an orange Hickenbottom pipe sticking out of the ground over there. I just wonder who put that in. Pardon me? Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, are you familiar?
I'm not
We have a
familiar with-
deputation,
I
we have a
shouldn't comment.
councillor
I'm not
asking
familiar with that.
questions and answers
Sorry.
through me, not the audience. Let's go. Thank you.
All right. it's there, I saw it yesterday, I just wondered if you fellas put that in? Looks like it's been there a while,
Okay.
it's for drainage, I wonder who put that in?
Yeah,
That's-
Mr. Mayor, perhaps one of the other condo owners could answer that question. Can I ask him to answer it?
It's all right, Ursula, I'll ask later if you want. Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
No, one speaker at a time, and then we'll get through this. Just a second, Mr. Baldock, thank you. Is there any other questions from council to Mr. Baldock? Thank you very much, David.
Thank you very much for your time.
Appreciate that. Is there anyone else in attendance this evening who wishes to speak in opposition or in general? Please come forward. I'll get his name for you. I should know it. For the record, would you give us your name, please?
Yes, my name is John Deacon.
Yes, John.
I'm a retired pediatrician. I also live in the condo group that is to the south of these buildings. I'm a pediatrician, and my interest is twofold. One is, if there are children in these buildings, where are they going to be outside of the buildings? Because from what I see, there is no place even for a bicycle or a wagon or anything. There's no place. My second thought has to do with a catastrophe that occurred in the Maritimes. And it had to do with a prominent husband and wife who were in the basement of a building that caught fire, and they could not get out and died. So I think you all are aware of this. When I look at these two structures, what I see is a subterranean exit for the basement apartment, that it is below ground level. You have to then come out of that and go up to get out of the building, to get out and onto the ground. And that seems to me to be probably the only exit for a family who would be downstairs. So they would have no alternative. If a fire started near the doorway, they would have no alternative except to perish. So my feeling is, be careful. I'm a doctor, so here's the tenet of all doctors. Fear the worst and plan for it, because guess what? It happens. So my thinking is, be very careful in terms of how the people who are going to be downstairs can get out. And I particularly worry about it in the DeMeyer's demise of a few years ago. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Deacon? Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Is there anyone else in attendance this afternoon who wishes to speak in opposition or in general to this application? Here? Yes, sir? If you wish to come and speak, in general or opposition, now is the time. Your name, sir?
Brian Smith.
Ryan Smith?
We're on Evergreen Hill.
On Evergreen, thank you. Smith.
And I've heard a lot of good points here, particularly because I was concerned about parking. I didn't realize until last week that it was not just 4 residences, but now it's 8. And I thought I just heard someone say, because it was at one time going to be commercial, there still will be commercial. Did I hear it pointed out that that commercial property will also have another 4 upstairs residences?
No, Alicia, the commercial property to the west?
Through the mayor, there will be a commercial property to the west with 4 apartments on the second story.
Yes,
They do have a parking lot for that one, it's separate.
Okay, so the 4 residences that became 8, now there's another 4. That's an awful lot of residents.
Correct.
That's a lot of automobiles. I mean, we have our parking lot driveway, we can park 8 cars. We have problems sometimes just getting out onto Evergreen Hill. I can't see being so many feet just away from the busiest part of the whole street that you're going to have a potential of 16 automobiles. And I thought there was a good point there too about, well, one, a walkway to provide for people to get around, but also where are children going to play? You're not going to have 16 residents and no children.
Anything further?
No.
Any questions for this gentleman, for Mr. Smith? Thank you very much, sir. Is there anyone else present this evening who wishes to speak in opposition or in general to this application? Please come forward. Okay, hearing none, Mr. Rowe, if you wish to come forward and respond to some of the concerns raised, this is the time. Thank you for being here, David.
Thank you very much. Sitting back there, at least had an opportunity to listen to some of the concerns and I guess perhaps some misconceptions. The units themselves intend to be a 2-bedroom unit upstairs and a single-bedroom unit downstairs. Under your policies related to accessory housing, there's quite a list of stipulations, and one of them includes you can't have a front door for the accessory unit. It has to be along the back. So that is a requirement of your policies. Actually, had we designed these units right from the get-go, we could have actually accommodated the parking. We simply would have not had in the garage. You just make 2 small units and then you have lots of parking on the side. So it could have easily had been accommodated on the site. As far as danger and fire and concerns like that, I expect the fire department and the building department through the Ontario Building Code to deal with that. So I think it's really unfair to try to paint this as a potential disaster waiting to happen because of huge overdevelopment. In fact, if you take looks at older parts of Simcoe, in fact, along Queen Street where your new offices are, you look at the densities in that area, it probably is higher than what is being proposed. And in fact, I did a historical review looking at densities over the years, and if you go back to about the 1920s and 1930s and so on, you look at the town of Simcoe, you look at the densities, they were probably triple the densities per acre than what we have today. This proposal is to bring forward affordable rental housing. And as you know, in living here in the last 3, 4 years, 5 years, we've all seen the price of housing double, in some cases even higher. What that is doing, and it was shown in your housing study done by your social housing department, there is an absolute chronic need for rental accommodation, affordable rental accommodation. What's being proposed in these 1-bedroom units, the client has agreed to follow the affordable housing guidelines for rental accommodation for single apartment units. Those single apartment units are identified in your own housing study being a chronic shortage. Now, we'd all like the thought of everybody being able to buy their own new home, 2,500 square feet. Seems younger people are building even bigger these days. But there are a lot of people in our community simply can't afford that. And you look at housing per day, the thought of $500,000 homes 20 years ago was hard to imagine. There might have been one or two in Simcoe, but now that seems to almost be the rule. What you're seeing there today is what is going to be there. Whether it's got 2 accessory units or it's just a simple 4 units, what you see is what's going to be there. There'll be no physical change in the built structure. People quite often will have an in-law unit downstairs. Well, under the building code, you can have an in-law unit, I guess, downstairs, depending what you put in the unit for parents or grandparents or single younger adults who haven't moved out. So you're not actually changing a thing. What this developer has brought to this town is affordable rental housing. And yes, I guess maybe it could appear to be out of character with these larger homes, but they're further down on Evergreen Hill Road. If you look across the road, really, you're looking at the back of fourplexes, which, again, have been, our rental units have been on the market here for at least probably 45 or 50 years. I lived in them when I first came to work for the region. What we are requesting here is very reasonable. Certainly follows within the not only the provincial guidelines, but it does follow within the guidelines and the requirements of your policy, with the exception of having an additional required parking space in the front yard. Had we built these units without garages, we could have accommodated that. The other concern about the lack of, landscaping or front yard or grassed area in the front, this county has really no rules when it comes to, we allow people to have double wide driveways all over the place. That's not something that people go in and get a building permit because I want to make my driveway wider. I see it in new subdivisions all the time that people want a two-car, two-wide driveway or 1.5 wide driveway. So what I think we have here really does fits with the policies. It fits with the certainly the mindset of provincial housing policy. It certainly fits within the absolute need for rental accommodation, affordable rental accommodation, to which these units will be built for. So based on that, I really would hope that council would see the benefit to the community, because there is such a lack of decent, affordable rental accommodation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Are there any questions from council to Mr. Rowe? Councillor Brunton.
Thank you, Mayor Luke, through you to Dave. Dave, a couple of things. One, I guess from the general discussion, it looks like we're concerned about density here, right? But my question to you is, we're not just dealing with these 2 fourplexes, or duplexes, I guess we'll call them.
Yeah.
We have that other part of the parcel to develop yet, and I'm starting to wonder with the overall density, I have no idea when it comes to what's going to go on the next little piece there in terms of paved area. And I'm really, can you tell me anything that's going to the west?
To the west, I haven't been involved in that part of the project, but my understanding is that there is an approved site plan for that part that does require adequate parking, both for any rental accommodation, but also space for snow storage, as well as space for the commercial aspect of it.
Okay, and I see the application here is for Sunfield, is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that the same Sunfield that's across the road to the west on Queen Street?
Yes, it is.
Same developer?
Yes, it is.
what are these going to be? Are these going to just be rentals, or are they going to switch into condos, or how?
No, they're being built as rentals.
Right.
That is the intention of the owner, is to have them as rentals.
Okay, and okay, with the Sunfield development, what are all those ones to the west?
Most of them on that side are rentals. There were a few condos on the first phase, but all the rest are rentals.
But is that a condo development over there?
No, I think it's primarily rental with 4 units. Yeah, I can get you an answer if you.
Thank you. He's going to come and give you an answer. Thank you, sir.
Hi, Larry Lecce at Sunfield Homes. Yes, the other site is a condominium. Started off as a 26-lot condo.
Right.
We have built rental units and have retained all but 4 units, the original 4 houses that were built there years ago. So,
It is a condo, but it's rental.
absolutely, we've rented it out from day one, and that's how it remains.
Is it finished in there?
We have to do the paving, the final paving.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Rowe? Thank you very much, David. Now, Mr. Brunton, before we get to closing the public meeting, you had a question about drainage. Do you want to pose that question and see if we can get an answer now? I recognize it's on a different property, but it's part of the area. Do you wish to pursue that? If you could stand up, and if you want to ask that question, I'll recognize you. Mr. Rowe, would you come back, please?
Yeah, all right, sure. I'd like to
Yeah,
know.
and we'll see if we can get you an answer. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Brunton.
Well,
Councilor Brunton.
it's a real problem down there, Dave. I mean, if you look at the photograph on page 138 in our agenda and 137, I mean, there's no secret, there's been a big problem down there, and I know,
That's correct.
I heard the word French drain. Surely we're not doing that.
No, my understanding is that there has been an approved lot grading stormwater management plan that encompasses the entire property, approved by the county.
You know what that is? Or like, are we gonna have a storm sewer system with catch basins?
My understanding is that there were storm sewers as part of it, but I'm not involved in
answer
that
that?
part of it.
The reason I'm asking that is because we're gonna have a lot more impervious area developed here in the short, the other half of the lot, and where's all that water going?
No, the system, as I understand, is designed to handle all of the stormwater coming off the site.
Yeah, well, I guess we just don't.
And I know in discussions with staff, what we are proposing is that the additional parking space out front would be of the concrete that is like crisscross, so that the water seeps directly into the ground, as opposed to being 100% runoff.
Well, it's still very high density there.
Well-
I mean, if you look at the whole 2 units with the impervious roofs, the double parking on the front now, and again, if you go down there, and I'm sure you've been there, you look
Yep.
at the back, there is no real storm sewer system. There's nothing but a bunch of straw bales there right now.
At this point, but they haven't completed that part of it, which is normal during the construction phase.
Well,
I really don't think that it can be characterized as being overbuilt in terms of stormwater runoff.
well, I'll
It has been
disagree
approved
with.
by the county. It's been approved by the county engineers, and I know they're quite.
Yeah, but nobody seems to see.
Any further questions, Councilor Brunton,
Yeah,
for Mr. Rowe?
I
We
guess-
won't get into a debate with
No.
Mr. Rowe, but if you got questions, he can provide an answer, hopefully.
Well, I guess, Your Worship,
Go ahead.
I would like to have seen the rest of the property, because it seems to me there's going a lot more on it, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Rowe, thank you very much. I'm looking for a mover and seconder to close this public meeting. Height has moved. Sonnenberg has seconded that we now close the public meeting. Those in favor? That's carried, thank you. So we will move on now. There is a staff recommendation in your package on page 121 and 122. I'm looking for direction from council. I see Councillor Black's hand. Councillor Black, please.
Mayor Luke, I'd like to move that this application be denied or not approved.
That it be refused?
Refused?
Thank you. Is there a seconder, Councillor Oliver?
Speak to it.
Just give me a second. I'd like to just read it, and then I'll let you speak to it. Moved by Councillor Black, second by Councillor Oliver, that the application by Sunfield Homes in Woodbridge, Ontario, affecting lands described as part of Block F, Plan 37M15. This is the urban area Simcoe of Norfolk County. This is to amend our Norfolk County official plan and the zoning bylaw 1Z 2014. The file numbers are there. It's recommended for refusal for reasons, it said, well, for refusal. And that public input has been received for this application, therefore was considered as part of this decision. To the motion, Councillor Black, you may start.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mayor Luke. And just to present my rationale, I think we've had concerns with that property from the beginning. It was originally designed years ago. The whole subdivision of Harvest Glen was to have a commercial component to it, and then just recently an amendment to do the residential component. I think there were residents around the area had concerns at that time. Now we're coming back and we're going to add even more people. And the way I calculated it before, based on the number of bedrooms, worked out to 32. But having heard Mr. Rowe, it's still, there could be up to 24 people on that site. And you know that every one of them has a friend. So it's just, it's overdevelopment in my mind. It's not appropriate. It does not fit that neighborhood, backing onto those condominiums, the nice large homes down the road. There are large homes across the way as well. It's just not appropriate, and even Mr. Baldock has brought up his concerns about the impervious nature of the ground and drainage, and I am concerned about that. If we allow this to happen, we're going to allow them to pave, a lot more of that limited green space already, and even as Mr. Baldock pointed out, there's the potential for paving it all the way to the back, so there's some way to get to the back apartment. So just in my mind, it is just not appropriate, and it is overdevelopment, and that's my rationale with not approving and refusing this application.
Further to the motion, Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Since our staff are recommending approval, I was wondering if our county manager could tell me the outcome of an OMB appeal. Should this be appealed at the OMB, or what his opinion would be? Because we know how that works.
Mr. CEO?
I think I'm being asked to play lawyer. I can put that hat back on. Appeals these, well, I suspect this would go to the LPAT unless there's something I don't know. That being said, it's eternally a challenge, regardless of whether staff don't recommend something and council approves it, or staff do recommend something and council doesn't approve it. So long as there's discord as between those two, it is the case that reasonable people don't always agree, and when they don't, evidence can be put forth to that effect. That being said, the LPAT's fundamentally changed the way in which challenges to municipal decision-making are made, and the new system is designed to show much greater deference to the will of council as opposed to the will of the applicant. That's the underlying premise of the revisions to what is now known as the LPAT. So, I mean, it's a fool's game, and while in many ways I might be foolish, to prognosticate as to what the outcome of a hearing might be. So I can't give you an answer there. I can tell you this does happen routinely around the province of Ontario, but the new system is designed to favor your decision, provided there's some basic reasoning and rationale to it. In essence, that's the logic of the new system.
Thank you for that. Like some of the concerns I have, we do need affordable rental housing here. And while it can be said 1,000 people or however many live in this apartment, it could very well be one senior per unit. Maybe they drive scooters. Maybe they don't have to have the 87 cars that we need here. If this was downtown, parking wouldn't be an issue. And the condition of the building without that firewall down the center, it's going to be hard to split. I don't know what we're going to have here. Some buildings that are going to sit there vacant forever. I trust in our building inspector that, or our chief building official, that it will be decode. And that basement apartment will not be built in a way that will allow people to die in there. So, you know, I have faith that the system will make it work for how it is supposed to be, and I'm not going to support the motion that's on the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Height. Councillor Sonnenberg, then Broughton, please, to the motion.
Nor will I support the motion on the floor. I won't support refusal. We've heard it from Mr. Rowe, and I've heard it dozens of times over the last few years, of the shortage of affordable housing. There are no apartments for young people to move into. They're just non-existent. You know, not everybody can live in a 5-bedroom, 6-bathroom house. That's what's going on in this country. If you talk to people who come here from Europe and from Asia and from other places, is the complete waste that we do in this country when it comes to housing. Drive up and down the streets, drive up and down the roads, and look at the houses that are built. It's to me, almost criminal what we do in waste of lumber and gravel and concrete. We overbuild. This solves a current problem for people that can afford something to live in. So I'm not going to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Broughton.
Very quickly, Your Worship, thank you. I think we've heard a lot about traffic and parking and so forth and drainage, but I'm going to say this. I don't know what reliefs were granted when it went to the Committee of Adjustment some time ago. I do recall speaking to a member of the Committee of Adjustment, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, there were a lot of reliefs to this property based on the concept at that time, but I may be wrong. But I'm totally disappointed when I don't know how many members of council have gone down there and looked at this. And I'll use the word, it's Mickey Mouse right now. I can't understand how we could allow something like this be built when we've got behind it to the south a beautiful development. And here we are, to me, and we haven't even seen the other half of it yet. So I guess I'm going to support the Councillor Black's motion and I would hope our staff could bring forward the whole development, not just piecemeal, because who knows what we're going to end up with here. And right now, there is no outlet for water, in my opinion, nowhere on that property. So I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I certainly am going to support the motion to turn this down. I have to disagree with my colleague in terms of overdevelopment. This is overdevelopment. All of council supports the need for affordable housing. And in Mr. Rowe's own words, had they designed the building properly in the first place and the parking for the building properly, perhaps they could have accommodated more housing units than we thought were being approved before. But that's not what was done. If you like, now at the 11th hour, a request has come in to create 4 more apartment units in a building that is going to be in 2 buildings that are crowded with 4 units already, let alone 4 more in terms of parking, green space, family space, et cetera, et cetera. So this is not, in my opinion, good planning, and it does create problems that we know will be there for a long time after this is either approved or turned down. So this is one where I feel pretty strongly that this would not be a good thing for us to approve. With the greatest of respect to the developer, we're glad they're here, but this one is one that should not be allowed to proceed.
Any other discussion on the motion? Haven't you already spoke to this? Go ahead.
You know, I want to speak to my legal second time, is to address the whole idea of affordability, because it seems to be a concern with some of the councillors. I can tell you that when the Harvest Glen subdivision was developed, affordability was planned into it. And that portion has been developed for affordability by Sunfield. So to have it just taken and plunked over into a different spot is not good planning. And what zoning is all about is putting like uses together, compatibility. In terms of apartments, we have 2 applications approved for 2 apartment buildings downtown Simcoe already on the books. I don't know where they're at, but they're approved. We actually have another apartment building that's been approved for quite some time on Hunt Street behind the motel. So there are applications, projects on the books that could accommodate some of these concerns. And, you know, maybe we should be looking out to some of the other urban areas so they can have affordable housing as well as just Simcoe. Because Simcoe, if you were to look at that and compare it with Delhi or Port Rowan, or Dover or Delhi, there's way more apartments and affordable housing in Simcoe than the other areas. Maybe we need to start looking at those areas as well to accommodate their needs.
Is there any further discussion on this motion? Okay, the motion is on the floor. It is for refusal of this application. I will call the question. Those in favor of refusal, this motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those opposed? That motion is carried. So the application is refused. Now, we've been sitting here, most of us, for close to 3 hours. We have 5 more applications. I would like to just have a 5-minute stretch and break. I'll be back here in 5 minutes. I got a quorum. We'll just keep going right straight ahead. Thank you. I'd like to get started in 1 minute, please. I move these over here. Okay. I have a quorum. I would like to get started. Let's go to page 139, please. There you will find DCS 1880. An application has been received to remove special provision 14.31 from the subject lands. This provision permits 2 dwellings on the subject lands. This application is required as a condition of a consent application. P&B Van Houten Farms has put forth this application. It affects the lands described as 172 Wilson Ave, and it's very close to Delhi. So, I will now open this meeting on DCS 1881, and Alicia, would you please present your report? Thank you.
The subject lands are part of a 156-acre farm, and it contains a dwelling and some farm buildings. The dwelling has been conditionally severed from the lands. The property is designated and zoned agricultural and has special provision 14.31. No public input was received for this application. This rezoning is required because no dwellings are permitted on the retained farmlands after surplus farm dwelling severance is approved. It will clean up the severed parcel as well so that only 1 dwelling will be permitted on that lot. This application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the official plan. Staff support this application and recommend that it be approved.
Looking for questions, Councillor Black, to planning staff?
I think this one's slightly different, but the essence of this is that rezone the retained land so no further homes can be built. Is that the essence of this report?
Through the mayor, so that's done automatically for most applications now, so that will automatically be applied, and this is just removing a special provision on the farm that permits 2 houses.
Okay.
But it will be zoned in the end so that no houses are permitted on the retained lands.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions to staff? Are the applicants here? Thank you. I will ask at this time if there's anyone here that wishes to speak in favor of the application to please come forward. And Mr. Van Houten, if you wish to speak first, would you please come to the microphone?
Your Worship, yes, I asked a question already to Alicia, and she helped me out, so I got the answer. It was regarding the bunkhouse, whether I was allowed to build a bunkhouse for my son when he purchased the property. And I must say, without any disrespect, all you councilors are hard on Alicia.
She can handle any one of them.
Okay, thanks, Charlie.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in attendance who wishes to speak this afternoon in favor of this application? Is there anyone in attendance this afternoon who wishes to speak in opposition or in general to this application? Anything further from council? A motion, please, to close the public meeting. Wells has moved, Sonnenberg has second. All those in favor? That is carried. The meeting is now closed. Page 144 is is staff's recommendation. Councillor Columbus? Councillor Oliver? Thank you very much. Columbus has moved. Oliver has seconded that the application for P&B Van Houten Farms, care of Perry Van Houten, at 172 Wilson Ave, R2 Delhi. This affects the lands of part of Lot 22, Concession 13, in the geographic township of Windham, Norfolk County. This is to amend our zoning bylaw 1Z 2014. File number is there, and it's recommended for approval for reasons as set out in DCS 1880. And there was no public input received for this application, and therefore will not be considered as part of the decision. Discussion from council on the motion. Those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Perry. Appreciate it. Page 151, staff report DCS 1881. An application has been received to rezone part of the subject lands from the agriculture zone to Hamlet commercial zone and part of the subject lands from agriculture zone to Hamlet residential zone. Bernard and Deborah Beyer have put forth the application. This affects the lands described as 159 La Salette Road. I will now open the meeting on DCS 18-81. Alicia, we're getting a lot of mileage out of you tonight. Would you give us your report on this application, please?
So this is an application to rezone parts of the property from agricultural to Hamlet residential and Hamlet commercial. And this application is a condition of a consent approval. The subject lands are bound by Windham Road 19, Souder Street, and La Salette Road in La Salette. And the subject lands are vacant, but part of a larger property containing the La Salette General Store, a single detached dwelling, and a detached garage. The lands are designated Hamlet and zoned agricultural and Hamlet commercial.